I can't believe this is really happening. This isn't clickbait. This isn't a speculation video. This is official. EA Sports just dropped the bombshell on Twitter. It said, for those who never stop believing, hashtag EA Sports College Football. College football is coming back. Now, we've been waiting for this ever since the end of the NCAA games, the last one being NCAA 14, that many of us still play to this day because it's so good. We've been hoping, praying, trying to find any way to get this game to come back, and I had pretty much given up hope. It just didn't look like it was happening, or at least not anytime soon. The problem was the former players were suing EA Sports because they were using their image and likeness, and EA Sports had no problem paying the players. EA Sports has tons of money, and it doesn't cost that much to license players as you would think it would, especially most college players who never really go on to play in the NFL anyway. It's not very expensive to license those guys. However, legally they couldn't do it because the NCAA would not let players earn money, or they wouldn't be eligible to play. So that was the problem. Now that they've changed those rules recently, allowing them to profit off of their name, image, and likeness, we knew there was a chance for the game to come back, but we hadn't heard anything. And up until now, it was just kind of looking like, yeah, maybe one day it could happen, but until there's some type of a union or something, it would be very difficult to license all of those individual players. There's so many college players. It's not a money issue, it's a time issue. All that paperwork, having to do individual deals with each player, it just didn't look like it was on the table until some type of a union or some type of organization was formed, similar to the NFL Players Association, where you just have to do a deal with the NFLPA and you get the rights to all the NFL players. You don't have to deal with them on a player-by-player basis. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking. Well, it's coming back, but it's EA Sports. Well, the thing is, if college football ever came back, it was always likely going to be EA Sports that did it. You know, there were other companies, maybe 2K could take a shot at it, but I don't think there's really room for multiple college football games. You know, there's really hardly even room for multiple NFL games, so I just don't think there's going to be enough room for 2 college games. It was most likely always going to be EA Sports because they could have always been the first to kind of get a game to market, and that just is what it is. But when you look at the NCAA games, like EA Sports made those too, and they were always kind of received better than Madden was. They just truly were, more so because of the environments and the depth of the game. Gameplay-wise, NCAA wasn't much different than Madden. The same bugs, the same kind of wonky gameplay existed in both. That EA like DNA in the gameplay was still in NCAA football. The problem with Madden is that Madden just doesn't have the atmosphere, the environment. It doesn't have the depth of like the Dynasty mode or the Road to Glory in NCAA. That's what made those games fun, was everything else outside of the gameplay. Now, there is an article on ESPN that we're going to cover where they talk about some important things that we need to know about. The thing that catches me off guard instantly before I read this article is that it's called college football and not NCAA football. To me, that means this isn't going to be like NCAA football. There's something very different about it, because I don't see why they would change the name. Usually when you change the name, it's because there's like a bad stigma on the old name and you want to like present this as something totally new. This isn't the old thing, you know, kind of like what NBA Live tried to do years ago when they changed the name for that 1 year because NBA Live had such a bad reputation that they were just trying to completely rebranded. NCAA football never had a bad name. People always loved it. Most people liked it more than they did Madden. So there's really no reason to change the name other than the fact that something is different about it. It's not going to be the same game. Could it be better or worse? That we don't know. But let's check out the article. It says here, EA Sports is coming back to college football. After last making a college football video game in 2013, the possibility of the game returning had been in limbo. Now it isn't. EA Sports Vice President and General Manager Daryl Holt told ESPN the game maker will be returning to the space with EA Sports College Football. It says here, as we look for the momentum that we're building on in sports, it all starts with the passion of our fans and the opportunities of what they're interested in, Holt said. I don't think a visit where I go outside wearing a piece of EA Sports branded apparel that someone doesn't go, hey, when is college football coming back? It will at some point, Holt said. There is no date on when the game will return or even a date where the return will be announced other than it won't be coming back for this year. Which makes sense. I mean, they just announced it. It's probably going to take some time to iron all this stuff out. I didn't expect it this year. Hopefully next year would be nice. It says here, to make the game happen, EA Sports partnered with Collegiate Licensing Company, CLC, to make sure they had the FBS schools, traditions, uniforms, playbooks, among other things, ready to go for the game. Over 100 teams will be in the game. That's huge, because I was already wondering, is it going to be like most of the big name teams? Is that why they're calling it college football? Because it's not going to be like NCAA football with every team. Maybe it'll only be the top 50 teams or something, but it says here over 100 teams, all of the licensing, traditions, uniforms, playbooks, so that is really good to see. Continuing on, it says, for now, EA Sports is planning to move forward without rosters that include the names, image, and likeness of real college players. Current NCAA rules prohibit athletes from selling their NIL rights while in college. Now, that's important here. But let's continue on, though, before we assume. It says, however, those rules are likely to be changed at some point in the coming year, either by the NCAA, state legislators, or Congress. It's not clear yet if the evolving rules will allow for the kind of group licensing arrangements that will be needed for EA Sports to negotiate with athletes to use their names in the game. Holt said that they will monitor the name, image, and likeness discussion if and when things change, but it's too early for that to happen. He also said that what happens in the name, image, and likeness legislation will not change whether the game happens or when it will end up on shelves. We'll just keep tabs on everything as it develops and we'll be ready, Holt said. That won't be a problem for us, but it's really not the answer for us right now to decide. We're as much passengers as anybody else. So we make sure we deliver what our college football game players would want in a game, and that starts with just a very immersive experience, and there's lots of things we can do to bring the true college gameplay and game day to the virtual world. Holt said EA Sports is still in the very beginning process of game development, building out the team and deciding what direction they want the game to go in. Conversations about bringing back the game began over a year ago, and the combination of momentum of the company combined with the technology they've seen on next-gen platforms like the PS5 and Xbox Series X further bolstered their decision to return to the space. What we had as plans for growth and expansion for our portfolio, college football has always been at the top of my list personally, working with Tiburon Studio where it was made, Holt said. So it was an easy conversation internally to say, hey, here's how we would approach it design-wise, and here's how we can move forward. That's been going on for a while and certainly wasn't a wait to see what happens here, even as continued legislation gets proposed. It's more around what we think we can do around the game for our players. One change from the prior iterations of the game for now will be the name of the game. Its prior iterations of the game from 1997 up until 2014, the title NCAA Football was used along with the year. Before that, it was College Football USA for 2 years, and in the first 2 years, it was Bill Walsh College Football. Holt said the plan for the reboot will not have the NCAA name, but to use EA Sports College Football. It all starts really with where we see college football is going. There's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of things happening in sports. EA Sports College Football gives us a name and brand to kind of work around for some things that might evolve, as well as what we're focusing on really out of the gate, which is really the FBS Division I schools and the road to the college football playoff and the college football championship. So EA Sports College Football we just felt was the right name for the product for not only now, but also how we move forward. The game, whenever it returns, will be the first college football title since NCAA 2014, which had former Michigan quarterback Denard Robinson on the cover. So that's very interesting. They really go into detail there about the name change, and it makes sense because they don't know for sure if they're going to have the name, image, and likeness for players when it launches. That was something I was worried about. Obviously, the rules are changing in the NCAA, but they might not be fully into effect yet, and even when they first fully go into effect, there's going to be a lot of hurdles to jump over to get this done. So I do think after reading that, it makes sense why the name change, because there's a very good chance this might not ever be like NCAA football where they had the actual image and likeness of players. It might never be that again, so to call it NCAA football would not match up with what NCAA football used to be. Also, like they said, things are kind of ever evolving and changing, so I do think the name change makes sense based on all of that. This gives them kind of a name that no matter what changes, it can still make sense. Even if they have to one day go completely generic teams or something, well, the name would still make sense because it's not called NCAA football, it's called EA Sports College Football. Now, I don't think name, image, and likeness is like a deal breaker for people. I think as long as you have real teams, real environments, the stadiums, right, the atmosphere, all that stuff, I think that's what people liked most about the games, right? There's people that are gonna create rosters and do their own rosters anyway. So that is like the one workaround that the player base can handle no matter what. I don't think that's a big deal. I think they just want everything else to be intact, the things that they can't edit themselves, really, the things that they can't do themselves. EA takes care of that. They make the game modes good and deep, and then we still have an NCAA football even if the rosters aren't completely exact. I mean, we see all the people playing the indie games and they just say, man, I wish a AAA studio could make this same game, right? Have the customization. Doesn't matter that there aren't real teams and real players. It's more about the feel of the game. But the indie games just don't ever really compare to the AAA games in terms of they don't have as much money and technology to make the games as smooth and as good, quite frankly, and as deep as you could on a AAA game. So the fact that we have that coming back, I think, is a big deal. We'll see if the name, image, and likeness comes around at any point, but I'm excited about it. Let me know how you feel below. As always, I will see you guys next time.